The room was still laughing when he collapsed. A few people on set thought it was another joke. That was the kind of man he had always been. Loud, sharp, unpredictable. The kind of comedian who could turn pain into a punchline before anyone noticed the wound underneath it. But this time something felt different. A woman standing nearby leaned down and touched his shoulder. His face had changed. The laughter in the room slowly faded into confusion. Then came the silence. The kind of silence that sits heavy in the chest long after the cameras stop rolling. For millions of Americans, he had been more than a comedian. He was the sound of old television sets glowing late at night. The voice echoing through living rooms after long workdays. The man behind Sanford and Son, one of the most important moments in black television history. But behind the fame of Red Fox stood a life shaped by abandonment, poverty, racism, addiction, betrayal, and a fight for dignity inside an industry that often laughed at black performers before it respected them. He made America laugh for decades. Yet, in the final years of his life, the man once called the original king of comedy was fighting battles far away from the spotlight. And maybe the saddest part of all was this. When he fell to the floor that day, almost nobody believed it was real. Long before the television cameras, before the comedy albums, before the lights of Las Vegas, there was just a small boy sitting quietly in a crowded black neighborhood, wondering why his father never came back. Red Fox was born John Elroy Sanford in St. Louis, Missouri, during a time when America rarely made room for poor black children to dream beyond survival. His father left when he was still very young, leaving his mother to carry the weight of the family alone. But even she eventually disappeared into another life in Chicago, leaving him and his older brother behind with their grandmother. The apartment was small. The money was scarce. Some nights felt colder than they should have. His older brother became the center of his world. Tough, reckless, always moving in and out of trouble. Young Red admired him anyway. Sometimes boys growing up without fathers looked for strength in the closest shadow they could find. At school, things did not get easier. His light complexion and naturally red hair made him stand out even among black classmates. Children mocked him constantly. The jokes came fast. So he learned to fight back the only way he knew how. With words. He made people laugh before they could hurt him. That survival instinct slowly became a performance. Teachers saw a class clown. But underneath the noise was a child learning how to turn humiliation into protection. Every laugh bought him a few seconds of safety. Years later, America would call him a comedy legend. Back then, he was just a boy trying not to feel alone. Eventually, school lost him completely. He was expelled after throwing a book at a teacher, and the streets became his real classroom. Chicago in those days moved with its own rhythm, loud corners, cigarette smoke, crowded sidewalks, hustlers leaning against storefronts while jazz drifted through open windows. That was where he learned the dozens. The brutal street game of trading insults back and forth until someone broke emotionally or physically. Red became dangerously good at it. Sometimes too good. Fights followed him often. But those corners sharpened his timing. Every joke needed rhythm. Every insult needed precision. Every pause mattered. Without realizing it, he was building the foundation of what would later become one of the most influential comedy styles in black entertainment history. By 14, he and his friends formed a small band and played music on street corners for spare change. They dreamed about New York constantly. In their minds, Harlem felt less like a city and more like a doorway. So they jumped onto a freight train carrying onions and headed east. For 3 days they survived on almost nothing except onions and hope. When railroad police caught most of the boys, Red escaped alone and made his way into Harlem. The city was overwhelming. Fast, hungry, alive. Harlem did not care who you were. It only cared whether you could survive another night. Sometimes he slept on rooftops with newspapers covering his body like blankets. Sometimes he stole food just to eat. Sometimes he wondered if anybody would ever remember his name. During those years, he met another young hustler with red hair and sharp instincts. A man named Malcolm Little, later known to the world as Malcolm X. The two became close friends while working at a restaurant together. People called them Chicago Red and Detroit Red. Both men carried anger. Both carried intelligence. Both understood the streets. But eventually their paths separated. Malcolm moved deeper into the world of crime before prison transformed him spiritually. Red moved toward nightclubs, music halls, and comedy stages, chasing something harder to explain. Not just money, not even fame, visibility. He wanted to be seen. In a country where black performers were often treated like background noise, Red Foxx wanted the microphone. And he was willing to suffer for it. By the time America truly discovered Red Foxx, he had already spent years turning struggle into performance. The clubs were dark back then. Smoke floated through the air thick enough to blur faces. Glasses clinked quietly while musicians tuned instruments somewhere near the stage. And in those crowded black nightclubs across Harlem and California, Red Foxx began building something raw, dangerous, and completely different from the polished comedy America was used to seeing. He was not clean-cut. He was not safe. And that was exactly why people could not stop listening. His comedy sounded like real life. Street corners, broken marriages, gambling debts, desire, anger, survival. He talked the way ordinary black Americans talked when television cameras were gone. That honesty shocked audiences at first, but eventually it became his power. Night after night, his reputation spread. People came to hear the man with the sharp tongue and the fearless mouth. The comedian who could insult an entire room and somehow make everyone laugh at the same time. That style would later influence generations of classic black comedians, from Richard Pryor to Eddie Murphy and beyond. But at the time, Red Foxx was still just trying to escape poverty. Then came the comedy albums. A record producer named Dootsy Williams offered to record his nightclub routines for almost nothing. Red accepted because he needed money quickly and never imagined those records would matter outside the clubs. But the albums exploded across America. Millions of copies sold. Suddenly, people who had never stepped inside a black nightclub were listening to Red Foxx routines in their living rooms, garages, and late-night parties. His voice became part of underground American culture. Long before social media or viral clips existed, people memorized his jokes and passed them around like secrets. That success transformed him into something larger than a local comedian. He became the original king of comedy. But success in black Hollywood often came with invisible chains. Despite selling millions of albums, Red Foxx earned far less money than he deserved. Contracts trapped him. Ownership stayed in other hands. The industry loved black talent as long as somebody else controlled the profits. That frustration stayed with him for years. Still, his popularity continued growing. In Las Vegas, where racism quietly shaped every hallway and casino floor, Red Foxx fought his way into rooms that were never designed for black entertainers to dominate. White audiences eventually embraced him, but acceptance came slowly and often with humiliation attached. Black stars could perform on stage, but many still could not stay in the same hotels as white guests. America applauded black entertainment while resisting black equality. Red saw that contradiction clearly. Then everything changed after he met Frank Sinatra. Sinatra recognized something powerful in him immediately. Talent respected talent. With Sinatra's support, Red Foxx escaped bad contracts and entered a larger world of opportunity. Las Vegas opened wider. Bigger crowds arrived. More money followed. For the first time in his life, he could breathe without constantly fearing hunger. But maybe his greatest contribution during that era was not his own success. It was what he built for others. In California, he opened a nightclub often called Red's Place, a chaotic but legendary space where future stars found opportunity. Young comedians like Richard Pryor, Flip Wilson, and Bill Cosby passed through those doors. Musicians, actors, hustlers, dreamers. Everybody gathered there. The club was loud, messy, sometimes violent, but it was alive. Inside those walls, black entertainers were not treated like outsiders. They were the culture itself. Then came Sanford and Son. When the sitcom debuted in 1972, it changed black television history forever. Red Foxx played Fred Sanford, a loud, stubborn junk dealer whose humor felt deeply familiar to working-class America. The show became an instant hit. Families gathered around television sets every week. The theme song drifted through homes like a memory. For many viewers, Sanford and Son was more than comedy. It was visibility. It allowed black characters to exist on national television with personality, flaws, rhythm, and humanity during an era when Hollywood still preferred stereotypes. Red understood the importance of that responsibility. Behind the scenes, he fought constantly for black actors to be treated fairly. He challenged writers, argued with producers, demanded respect. He refused to let black performers become cartoons for white audiences. Some people called him difficult. Others called him necessary. Because beneath the jewelry, the gambling, the fame, and the laughter, Red Fox never forgot where he came from. A little boy abandoned in silence does not easily trust the world. Even after becoming a comedy legend, part of him still feared losing everything again. Success gave Red Fox money, fame, and national recognition. But it never gave him peace. Behind the laughter of Sanford and Son, his personal life was beginning to fracture quietly. The pressure of television schedules, business battles, gambling habits, and years of emotional scars slowly started catching up with him. Fame had opened expensive doors, but it had also exposed the loneliness he spent decades trying to outrun. His marriage suffered first. People close to him described constant arguments, emotional distance, and accusations of infidelity. The man who could make entire studios laugh often struggled to maintain calm inside his own home. Relationships became casualties of a lifestyle built around performance, nightlife, and escape. And somewhere beneath all of it was exhaustion. Red Fox had spent most of his life fighting for survival. Even after becoming rich, part of him still behaved like the poor kid from St. Louis who feared tomorrow might disappear without warning. That fear shaped everything. On the set of Sanford and Son, tensions grew heavier each season. Red clashed constantly with producers and network executives over money, creative control, and the treatment of black actors in Hollywood. He believed white executives were profiting far more from the show than the people whose culture gave the series its soul. And honestly, he was not entirely wrong. At a time when black television stars rarely controlled ownership or long-term profits, Red demanded something revolutionary: respect, equity, and financial security beyond the cameras. He wanted his family protected long after the applause ended. But Hollywood rarely rewards people who challenge the system openly. Soon, the arguments became public. There were salary disputes, lawsuits, walkouts, production delays. Some executives labeled him difficult and unpredictable. Others quietly admitted he was exhausted from years of carrying both the show and the racial pressure surrounding it. Eventually, the emotional strain became impossible to hide. By the mid-1970s, the magic behind Sanford and Son no longer felt the same for him. The laughter was still there, but the joy behind it had faded. Red Fox finally walked away from the show that made him a household name. And almost immediately, things began falling apart. His next television project failed quickly. The ratings collapsed. Critics moved on. Hollywood, as always, kept searching for younger faces and easier personalities. Then came the financial disasters. Years of gambling, lavish spending, bad business management, and unpaid taxes finally exploded into public view. Despite earning enormous amounts of money during his career, Red Fox had developed a dangerous habit of avoiding financial responsibility. Friends warned him repeatedly. Some even helped him before. But the cycle never stopped. In 1983, he filed for bankruptcy. Then came the humiliation that would follow him forever. The IRS arrived at his home and seized nearly everything he owned: cars, jewelry, furniture, cash, personal belongings. Cameras captured the moment publicly. America watched a legendary black entertainer stand helpless while the government emptied pieces of his life into trucks. At one point, they reportedly left him with almost nothing except his bed. It was painful to watch, not because people saw a rich man losing possessions, but because they saw a comedy legend stripped of dignity in front of the entire country. The same America that once celebrated Red Fox now consumed his downfall like another television episode. And maybe that hurt him more than the debt itself. Friends later said he tried to laugh through the pain, but the humiliation stayed with him deeply. Some believed racism played a role in how aggressively the situation was publicized. Others argued his financial choices created the disaster. The truth probably lived somewhere painfully in between. Still, even during collapse, people who truly loved him refused to abandon him. Eddie Murphy helped revive his career by casting him in Harlem Nights, introducing Red Fox to a younger generation that barely understood how much modern comedy owed him. The performance reminded audiences that beneath the headlines and tax scandals still stood one of the greatest black entertainers America had ever produced. But age, stress, and years of emotional weight had already taken their toll. By then, the laughter sounded different, softer, more tired, like a man trying to keep the lights on inside himself long after the audience had gone home. To fully understand Red Fox, people have to understand the America he lived in. This was not the Hollywood audiences know today. Back then, black entertainers often walked through side entrances, stayed in separate hotels, and fought for opportunities that white performers received automatically. Television networks wanted black talent, but only when it felt controlled, harmless, and profitable. Red Fox never fit comfortably into that system. He was too loud, too honest, too street, too unwilling to pretend. That was exactly why so many black Americans connected with him. For older generations especially, Sanford and Son was more than just another sitcom. Felt familiar. The arguments inside the house, the pride behind the jokes, the struggle hidden underneath humor. Fred Sanford reminded many working-class families of fathers, uncles, neighbors, and men they grew up around. That authenticity mattered. At a time when black characters were still heavily stereotyped on national television, Red Fox brought rhythm, imperfection, intelligence, and emotional realism into millions of American homes. He helped create space for future black sitcoms that would later shape American culture for decades. Without Sanford and Son, there may never have been the same path for shows led by black voices in mainstream television. And beyond television, his influence reached almost every major black comedian who came after him. Richard Pryor carried pieces of Red's honesty. Eddie Murphy inherited his fearless energy. Comedians like Bernie Mac, Martin Lawrence, and countless others followed doors that Red Fox helped force open through persistence and sacrifice. That is why many still call him the original king of comedy. Not because he was perfect, but because he changed the language of American comedy itself. Internationally, audiences often viewed Red Fox as part of a larger story about Black America. A story filled with talent, resistance, survival, and contradiction. His career exposed uncomfortable truths about racism in entertainment while also showing the enormous cultural power of African American creativity. People laughed at his jokes, but hidden underneath those jokes were decades of pain that many Black Americans immediately recognized. The poverty, the humiliation, the feeling of always needing to perform just to be treated fairly. Even his financial collapse became symbolic to some viewers. A painful reminder that fame did not always protect Black artists from exploitation, isolation, or public disgrace. Yet despite everything, Red Fox remained deeply respected within entertainment circles. Because the people inside the industry understood something casual audiences often missed. Modern comedy was standing on foundations he helped build. Every fearless comedian who spoke openly about race, pain, addiction, sex, politics, or survival owed something to the risks he took decades earlier. America laughed at Red Fox for years. History remembers him for something much larger. He taught Black entertainers they did not have to soften themselves to deserve the spotlight. On the day Red Fox died, the set did not immediately stop moving. People stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether they had just witnessed another joke or something far more serious. That uncertainty somehow captured his entire life perfectly. He had spent decades teaching America to laugh so naturally that even his final collapse looked like part of the act. But there was nothing funny about what happened next. Hours later, one of the most important figures in Black television history was gone. He was 68 years old. And just like that, the voice that once filled comedy clubs, living rooms, casinos, and late-night television faded into silence. Still, some people never truly leave. Even now, Decades later, the legacy of Red Fox continues to move quietly through American culture. You can hear pieces of him in modern stand-up comedy, in fearless storytelling, in comedians willing to speak honestly about race, poverty, pain, family, addiction, and survival without hiding behind perfection. Before many entertainers had the freedom to be unapologetically black on national television, Red Fox already was. That mattered. He showed future generations that black performers did not need to erase their voice, soften their neighborhood roots, or imitate somebody else's version of success just to reach mainstream America. His comedy carried the rhythm of real streets, real people, and real struggle, and audiences felt that truth immediately. Of course, his story was not clean. There were mistakes, financial disasters, broken relationships, anger, pride, self-destruction. At times, the same fire that made him brilliant also burned parts of his life to the ground. But maybe that complexity is exactly why his story still feels human. Red Fox was never a polished fairy tale built for Hollywood comfort. He was complicated, vulnerable, funny, wounded, and unforgettable. For many older Americans, hearing the Sanford and Son theme song still unlocks memories instantly. A couch in the living room, parents laughing after work, television light flickering softly across the walls while the world outside kept changing faster than anyone expected. Those moments matter more than ratings ever could. Because in the end, the greatest legacy of Red Fox was not fame alone. It was familiarity. He made millions of people feel seen. And perhaps that is why his story continues surviving generation after generation. Not because he lived perfectly, but because he reflected something honest about America itself, the struggle to hold dignity together while carrying pain nobody else fully sees. Today, younger audiences may discover him through old reruns, comedy albums, or stories told by comedians who still speak his name with respect. But older viewers remember something deeper. They remember how he made hard times feel lighter for half an hour. That kind of gift never disappears completely. So if you still remember hearing that Sanford and Son theme song somewhere in your childhood, tell us where you were when you first heard it. And if this story reminded you of someone who carried pain behind laughter, share their name below, because some voices leave echoes behind long after the